Good morning. This is John Dingfelder, and you're listening to WMNF's Down and Dirty. Good morning, Jason Marlowe.
Good morning, John. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Kick them when they're up, kick them when they're down. That's what we're all about at Down and Dirty.
We're about assault.
About what?
We're about assault. We're kicking people.
Oh, I thought you were saying like salt.
Particularly healthcare executives.
I thought you were saying like salt, like put salt in the wound.
We could do that too.
There you go. So here we are this morning, Friday the 13th. Oh, goodness. And we have a great show lined up. We're sort of doing end of the year stuff because perhaps it's the end of the year.
Is it?
And this show is about an end of the year wrap up of environmental issues. And we've had Max Chesness on our show, I think, a few times before in this year, and always a great guest. He's a writer for the Tampa Bay Times and focuses on environmental issues. Good morning, Max Chesness.
Good morning. It's great to be back here.
Yeah, we're glad.
Returning champion.
Super glad to have you. You have done just a fantastic job. As a matter of fact, I'm worried that you've done such a good job that some other bigger newspaper from around the country is going to snatch you up.
I don't have any plans to leave. I am here to stay.
All right. Yeah. I hear you, but I don't know. The Washington Post or the New York Times might wave some big money at you.
Oh, yeah. Big money in journalism, as we all know. That's where the big bucks are lying. In fact, that's why Juan Soto was just signed to a $765 million contract with the Washington Post.
Yeah. You are a strange bird, Jason.
I am. It's true.
So, Max, how's life?
It's been busy. I would say this has been the busiest year of my professional career. Not only did we break this big state park story, but we had two back-to-back hurricanes. So as a climate environmental reporter, it's been nonstop, to say the least. It has been very busy.
Yeah, the Bay Area has been definitely swamped with hurricanes this year. Jason and you, young man, are moving.
Yeah, moving company comes today.
That's crazy.
Yeah, life is fast. Life is lifing, as they say.
The question is your wife moving with you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Miracles do happen at Christmas, huh?
Jesus Christ.
Where are you moving to?
On the river, up in the Temple Crest area.
Okay.
Yeah. On the river.
On the river.
Very neat.
Now on the river.
Max will know where to put his canoe in.
Are you worried about flood issues?
So, honestly, the only reason why I think I agreed to this was we're Flood Zone X. We're on a large, a ridge overlooking the river. Yeah. And, I asked some of the neighbors what their experience was through Helene. If they experienced the street floods, the homes don't. And, if that's a once-in-a-100-year storm, then I feel pretty comfortable about, if it's a 1-in-1,000-year storm, I'm going to drown. So it doesn't really matter anyway.
A lot of us will be underwater then.
I have my snorkel. I'll be okay. My home will be a lovely aquarium.
Are you required to pay flood insurance?
I am not, but we're going to do so anyway because I've had to watch enough city council meetings of people in Parkland Estates, and if you have a $1.2 million home and you don't have flood insurance, it's your fault.
Yeah.
Well, as long as we're talking hurricanes, let's start with that story, and then we'll transition into the state parks and those stories, which were all fascinating. But one of the stories that jumped out at me, and I think you might have written it, or maybe one of your other folks wrote it, was there's a lot of storm relief from different government agencies and community groups and that sort of thing. But I think one of your partners wrote about a disparity in storm relief down in South St. Petersburg. Do you remember that story?
Somewhat, yeah.
It jumped out at me just because, poor people in this Bay Area and everywhere, there's always disparity. It seems like, and especially on something like a big storm. Big storm comes in. My wife and I went over to Davis Island about 2 or 3 days after Helene hit. Yeah. And Davis Island got swamped, just like a lot of other low areas in Tampa and around the Bay Area. But what we found was really interesting is about a week later, we went back and Davis Island was all cleaned up, and I talked to because I used to live on Davis Island. I talked to some people I knew out there. And they said, yeah, we weren't waiting around for government to come pick up all this trash in front of our houses.
They fund private debris cleanup.
They hired private companies and people who just were driving by with a trailer, and they loaded it up and they cleaned it up and they raked their yard and everything. Now, granted, on the inside of their house, I'm sure there's still a lot of mess, but at least cosmetically, the outside in Davis Island cleaned up really fast. In contrast, the story talked about South St. Petersburg, where, it's like still a mess.
Yeah, it's when people that have the money, I'm sure, have been paying big dollars to clear their yards. People don't want to look at debris or be reminded, right, of what the storm that just rolled through looks like. But yeah, when you drive through South St. Pete, especially too, it's fascinating to see just which corners of the neighborhoods are still. Looks like the storm rolled through yesterday, right? Whether there's piles of debris, still down trees, it's pretty telling when you take a drive down there.
Yeah, I mean, the economic disparity of these storms and how they affect the people that they affect, it's only going to further entrench the inequality that we already have in the region.
And then, as accountability reporter, storms, they create such big opportunities for accountability journalism, following the money, seeing where each dollar is going, how it's being spent, whether it's to, this huge issue of the Rays Stadium now has a whole other layer of significance, because we have money, we have financial needs for storm cleanup and storm relief now, and so the question of funding a Rays Stadium is
$57 million, I believe, to repair the roof.
Yeah, so these questions obviously are heightened when you have something like a back-to-back storm situation where money now is extra important.
Yeah, building a new stadium is one thing, and they've talked about doing that for a long time. But $50 million to repair a roof is totally ridiculous. It's like, oh, I'm going to fix up my house because 2 years from now we're going to tear it down. It's like stupid.
No, it's deeply insulting. And I think to Max's point, if I'm a person living in South St. Pete and I'm outside, I'm looking at the debris from my house when 3-feet drywall were gutted around the whole side of my house. And then I see the city and the county willing to spend $60 million on keeping a baseball team in town for literally just 2 years. God, I would be down there with pitchforks and a torch.
And if this year they're willing to play in the Yankees Steinbrenner Stadium in Tampa, why couldn't they do it for 2 years or 3 years or whatever? Anyway, we are here at Down and Dirty. It's 813-239-9663 if you want to join the conversation. Today we have, of course, my co-host, Jason Marlowe, and we have Max Chesness from the Tampa Bay Times, who's the environmental and accountability reporter. And Max, the other issue I wanted to mention in regard to hurricanes was this issue about, and you wrote this story, I think, that between the two big storms, Helene and Milton, they swamped Tampa Bay's flood defenses. Basically, I think you wrote about sewage treatment plants and facilities, and also flood prevention facilities like stormwater ponds and that sort of thing being just overwrought.
Yeah, we wanted to take a systemic look at our flood infrastructure in Tampa Bay to figure out what exactly went wrong, because there were areas that had never flooded before that were suddenly inundated, or areas that were told
not even near a body of water like a river or bay. They were isolated areas that all of a sudden had a stormwater pond that failed or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
In some cases, neighborhoods that were told by their neighborhood associations that they were fine, their flood risk is basically minimal, that were ultimately flooded because infrastructure in their own backyard started to fail. So for that story, that story took a couple weeks to report. There was 3 of us. We had a data reporter, and then Justin Garcia, who's another governmental accountability.
We love Justin.
Accountability reporter.
We'll have to have him on.
Yeah, and so the 3 of us looked at what exactly went wrong in the state. My area of focus for that piece was on sewage lift stations. So basically, you go around Tampa or St. Petersburg. These stations are designed to keep wastewater moving, right? Keep it moving and flowing and not backing up. And what happens in the storm is that when these lift stations lose power, sewage will then spill out of them. And I spoke with this one woman named Judy Dolan, who lives over here in Tampa, has stage 3 Parkinson's, and struggled because as 3 a.m. the night Milton made landfall, her house became inundated with human sewage. 2 inches of human waste in her house.
Because what part of Tampa generically?
Oh, I don't remember. I think it was South Tampa somewhere.
Yeah.
I forget. But her house had 2 inches of human waste, and
That's 2 inches too much.
The reason was because a lift station. She lives at the lowest point apparently in her neighborhood, and sewage ran downhill into her home. And for weeks afterwards, I mean, she couldn't use the bathroom in her own house for a week. She was using the restroom outside, and it was because this infrastructure that was designed to keep sewage moving away from homes failed because the power went out.
Yeah, and now, a lot of times you see the government will pull in a temporary pump,
right?
A generator with a pump,
yeah,
and try and overcome that deficiency.
Well, that's a question I brought to both Pinellas and Hillsborough counties was how do we stop this from happening in the future? And one solution was providing pumps with temporary generators and moving those around. But the cost of doing that, we were told from wastewater utility folks that the wastewater bills that the consumer would have to be paying are much higher because of the cost of supplying every lift station in the county with a generator is very costly. I think it was to the tune of multiple millions of dollars to do that. So there's also solutions about whether or not we add, you can add solar panels to keep these generators moving when the power goes out to back up energy into them. There's a whole the question of political will, right, when you do stuff like this, because the common thing you'll hear from wastewater utility managers or even county leaders is that these are 1 in 100-year storms, and these are storms that are very rare, and whether or not we should be funding for.
Well, maybe events. If that stuff flowed into county commission chambers, then they might have had a different position.
I want to talk about this because this is a position I've heard both from city council and from county commission that, frankly, has irritated me to my zenith and my breaking point. We should, we cannot prepare for these once in. Please tell that to the Netherlands or to Singapore or I thought this was a country that builds things and does things, and I am very exhausted of hearing that we cannot build infrastructurally for these issues. Yes, we can. Build one less F-35.
Wasn't there a lot of F-35? Wasn't there a lot of money generated from Biden's infrastructure bill to address these kind of things?
Yeah, and I mean, but also we know with a warming planet that storms are becoming more intense, right? These 1 in 100-year storms are becoming more common and more frequent. So the argument that this is a rare event and that it's part of doing business is really with climate change. We're seeing that it's happening more and more, and it's testing our infrastructure like never before. Especially, I mean, prior to this year, think of the last time Tampa Bay had a direct hit. Really was over 100 years ago, and even Milton couldn't be classified as a direct hit on Tampa Bay because it hit south of us, but it was a window into what would happen if we had a direct hit from a major hurricane.
And Helene hit north of us, basically.
They stayed 100 plus miles offshore of us. And
that's right.
Look how much storm surge it brought to our barrier islands.
Yeah. Well, listen, we have a call, gentlemen. George, not sure where he's from, wants to talk a little bit about homeowners insurance. So let's
George, are you there?
George, are you there?
Yeah, could you hear me?
Yeah, yes, good morning. Good morning. Thanks for joining our conversation. What's up?
Yeah. Well, whatever I'm on I-75 headed north, I always like to listen to MNF. But I'm retired from the insurance restoration industry. We would respond to emergency fires, floods, things like that. And what the recent changes that the Florida legislature made to limit reimbursement when your insurance company is not dealing with good faith and you want to hire an attorney, they basically have shut that down as a recourse for property owners. And now you read about the insurance companies denying up to 2/3 of the claims that they're getting. And I was wondering in regards to the accountability in the industry, if you have any comments about that or if you've done any stories about that.
Hey, George, thanks for calling. We appreciate it. Be safe on that highway.
Have a great day.
Yeah, that's a great question, George. So I've done a lot of post-storm insurance coverage. Predominantly Hurricane Ian was sort of a case study that I focused on back in 2022. I have a lot of unpublished reporting, actually, that we're still finding a home for a bigger project, but I can talk a little bit about it. I spoke with people that lived on Fort Myers Beach during Hurricane Ian, and there were stories that I was hearing where people would go through 7 different desk adjusters before they finally were assigned someone that could hear their case. I spoke with one man who lost his entire home in storm surge, and when an insurance person came out to evaluate his home, they said that they couldn't prove that it was water damage, and said that his claim wasn't going to be able to be fulfilled. So there are so many stories of people that are struggling after losing everything, with finding some sort of financial relief. And I think Ian really brought that to light. There was some reporting back at the time where, there were insurance companies that were fudging the numbers on some claims. And
it'll be fascinating to see the follow-up after these two storms.
Yeah, well, that's
in another year from now after these claims.
I, for one, am looking forward to the zero accountability and no one ever getting punished for screwing all of these innocent people. Well, which is inevitably going to happen.
And the concept of good faith, because I've litigated some of these good faith issues, is extremely important.
Yeah.
Because when the insurance company has a good faith issue hanging over their heads, it's amazing how quickly they will. Well, I should say good faith, bad faith. Bad faith basically is if they're operating in bad faith and they got caught with it, sometimes they can get double or triple damages. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah.
But if they get, with that hanging over their heads, it's amazing how quickly they used to answer their calls. Now, if the legislature eviscerated that, then I can see where homeowners have been screwed.
Oh, I think that's why we, as journalists, view storytelling as so important, because until you hear what people are going through with insurance companies, it's hard for, I think, politicians to really understand the struggle that day-to-day Floridians are going through. And so finding people, especially after Helene and Milton, that are actively going through the insurance struggles right now and telling those stories is an important part of our job. And honestly,
who should they contact if they're have a story like that at the Times?
You can email me. One of our reporters who lives in Tallahassee, Lawrence Maurer, is, to me, the best insurance reporter in the state of Florida. He has been handling the beat for a very long time and is all over insurance issues.
So what would his email be?
Oh, I think it's the initial of his first name and then his last name, Mower, so LMOWER at TampaBay.com. He'd probably be happy to hear your insurance struggle stories, because he really leads with a lot of accountability. So
happy to hear your the phrasing on
as
that.
A reporter, right? Yeah.
He'll be glad to hear from you. He won't be happy to hear your story, but he will be glad to
talk
hear
to you about your struggles. Yeah.
So another story you wrote about was the Mosaic plant over there on the other side of the bay. I'm not sure exactly where it is.
Riverview.
Okay. And they had a spill from Milton.
Yeah, so Hurricane Milton was inbound. We were 8 hours from landfall, and we wanted to run a quick analysis to see how many of the state's phosphate waste piles were within the path of Hurricane Milton. We've phosphogypsum stacks. If you're driving through Riverview, you've probably seen it. It looks almost like a landfill, a giant, large stack of phosphate waste called phosphogypsum. So we ran this analysis. We found that 22 of the state's 25 gyp stacks were directly within Milton's line of fire. Most of those in the Tampa Bay area.
Hillsborough, Polk,
Hardy. There's an area called Bone Valley, which is in the center of the state. It's very rich in phosphate because of the fossil structure.
For now,
maybe even Manatee,
Manatee as well, right? So we wanted to really highlight the vulnerability of the Bone Valley region as Milton was inbound. We wrote this analysis saying, there's a lot of people that are expressing worry about the structural integrity of these areas, the pollution opportunities that could happen with Milton. And so we wrote this story, and then sure enough, we heard from Mosaic, which is a Fortune 500 phosphate company based out of Tampa. They're headquartered in Tampa. We found that they came out saying there was a stormwater spill where some of the waste was drained into a manhole on the property, and that manhole discharges into Tampa Bay. So there's a reporting volume that major companies have to meet. So if the volume exceeds 17,500 gallons potentially, it's a minimum reporting threshold. They have to say publicly, we had a spill. So they reported it, meaning that the volume was at least that much. And so we reported that, of course, there was a spill from Riverview, that this wastewater, this stormwater was discharged from the property into the bay.
And I'm sure it's a complete coincidence that we have a reporting this week that Carena brevis, also known as red tide, found in 17 samples, 1 from Pinellas, 1 from Hillsborough, 7 from Sarasota, 1 from Charlotte, 6 from Lee, and 1 from Collier.
Yeah, and red tide, of course, is, everyone always sort of holds their breath.
Literally, they literally hold their breath.
When after a hurricane, because all of these nutrients, whether it's from sewage spills, things like the Mosaic spill, enter our waterways, that acts as a fuel for Carena brevis to spark and become a major algal bloom.
But usually I think of red tide as a summer thing, as as a warm weather thing, and now we're talking about winter.
Well, if you remember, I think it was 2022. It was after Ian. We had a pretty bad red tide, and there's a lot of science out there about how the storm's connection to red tide and what it looks like. But the science is pretty clear that if we over-nutrify our waterways, that it makes red tide worse.
Too much nitrogen, too much phosphorus.
Any time of the year. If you're just tuning in, we've got Max Chesness from the Tampa Bay Times. He's joined us to talk about environmental issues. Jason Marlowe is here, and our phone number to call in is 813-239-9663. Jason, what's up?
So, Max, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the kind of the backlash to some of your reporting. I mean, excellent reporting, Dee, but with a Senate Bill 80, proposed by Republican State Senator Gail Harrell from the Palm Beach area. She's proposed the Senate bill that would basically prohibit the development of state parks in some way. It would specifically prohibit certain sporting amenities in state parks.
All right, so we got to back up and talk about that story a little bit.
I can lay out
before we come into the legislation. Go ahead.
I'll lay out. So for your listeners who might not be aware, or just to catch up everybody's memory here. So we broke the story back in August that the state of Florida's environmental agency, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, was sort of quietly proposing these developmental plans for 9 state parks across the state, from Miami all the way up to the Panhandle.
Because DEP now runs the state parks, correct?
They oversee they manage the state parks. So they have a park division that oversees those issues. So we found through documents that were leaked that the state wanted to develop a golf course on Jonathan Dickinson State Park in Martin County. They wanted to build 2 350-room hotels, both at Anastasia and Topsail Hill State Park.
St. Augustine and Panhandle area.
Yep. And then
Martin County's directly across the state, kind of little to the south, near Palm Beach.
North of West Palm Beach. Mm-hmm. And then here in our own backyard, Hillsborough River and Honeymoon Island, they wanted to add pickleball courts. So we wrote this story, and the state kind of rolled these out very quietly. They didn't really announce it fully, and they gave the public 6 days to weigh in on these proposals at these meetings that were going to happen simultaneously for 1 hour on a single day. And people were really mad. I think we broke the news, I think, at like 4 p.m. on a Tuesday. And I think by 4:30 p.m. we saw the first protesters outside of Jonathan Dickinson State Park. That's when we knew it was going to be a big story.
And you broke it through a wonderful whistleblower up in Tallahassee.
We got records from a former Parks employee who was told that he claims he was told to create maps that would show where the golf course would go on Jonathan Dickinson, and in his telling to us that he was overwhelmed and really he was really turned off by the amount of potential habitat destruction that he was being told to sort of broadcast, and that's why he leaked these documents. After that happened, he was of course fired, and he raised, I think, $250,000 over 48 hours after he was fired.
Good for him and good for us.
Yeah.
He landed on his feet. He's a whistleblower. They fired him. He landed on his feet because the community came out and said, "Thank you, sir."
He's actually a friend of a friend.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, James Gaddis?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he told me when he raised that money, he wants to potentially start his own private cartography company. He's a single father.
He's a single dad, got a little girl.
Yeah.
Good for him. Anyway, go ahead.
As we've continued to report the story, and the story is far from over. We have a lot of material we're still about to publish. We have a new story coming out potentially today about another piece of news that was shaken loose during all of this. Was that back in June, the Florida cabinet quietly approved a land swap, basically giving a private golf course developer
Withlacoochee State Forest
300 acres of Withlacoochee State Forest land to expand their operations to add more golf courses. That was in Hernando. So that was that information was also tipped off to us at the time of all of this park stuff, and so we have a report coming out today about the status of that land swap deal and whether or not it's dead in the water now that a couple months have passed and there's been no movement on it.
So, I used to have a little house on the river right up there in Hernando County, right almost adjacent to the to that park. Very sensitive area, very rural area.
Yeah.
It's horrific. Like, we need another golf course. Golf courses are dying all over the country and all over the state. We don't need another one. Sorry to my son Christopher, who's an avid golfer. But the other super interesting story, is this Jack Nicklaus connection. That's crazy. And possibly Donald Trump.
Right. So there was a conversation that was held in 2018, which included Jack Nicklaus's grandson, Jack III, and Donald Trump. And
wait, he's really named Jack III?
Jack Nicklaus III. Oh, yeah. And so
I just hope he can play golf.
So
my pinky inextricably just went up, just the third.
Oh, the third.
So the story that we wrote was about this conversation between between Donald Trump and the third, and about there's some legal disputes going on between Jack and his former company, and about whether or not Jack will be able to continue to build golf courses. And so we wrote this story, design golf courses. We wrote this story, and for us too, that we thought the story was important because it does establish that there was a Jack Nicklaus connection to the state park situation, which, Jack's lawyer called us and talked to us and confirmed that Jackson was involved, and he was approached by Folds of Honor, the veterans nonprofit group that was also approached. Gail Harrell, who has filed this bill to talk about, was approached by Folds of Honor to build a golf course on Jonathan Dickinson State Park.
So you write this story, it goes totally viral across the state,
across the nation.
Yeah, that's true. All of these communities that have state parks that are under attack by Tallahassee to put in these ridiculous things like pickleball courts or golf courses or 300-unit hotels.
Yeah,
they rise up. The people rise up.
Have you seen what a photo of what a 350-room hotel looks like as well? And if you look at that, and then you look at a place like Anastasia State Park, first of all, there's just not enough land over there to have a structure like that. And you mentioned earlier the staffing requirements of having people that would run that operation.
Well, I would assume one of these high rises in downtown Tampa and/or Clearwater Beach is probably about a 200 or 300 unit hotel.
So add another 50 rooms on top of that. But so the outcry to this reporting and to a lot of nonprofits that mobilize their audiences through petitions and things was very swift. I mean, we saw here at Honeymoon Island, there was 300, 400 people that gathered multiple days of protests.
I love the photographs. People, you have to go look at the photographs on Max Chestnut's story.
There's some good photos.
There's some great photos. This one guy with a guitar playing, "This land is your land, this land is my land."
That photo was shared all over the place at the time.
Beautiful photo. There's the hippies came out, and but this isn't
across
really
the political spectrum, though.
Totally, it's not a left issue. It's not a right issue. It's a conservation issue which straddles all political parties.
Yeah, I mean, when you have Rick Scott and then Congresswoman Castor on opposite sides of the political spectrum agreeing that this is a bad idea, then that's pretty clear this is bad policy.
So let's jump to the bill that Jason was talking about.
Right. Yeah. So Senate Bill 80, Senator Gail Harrell is a Republican in Martin County, so her district is Jonathan Dickinson State Park. We reported earlier this year that Folds of Honor, the veterans nonprofit behind the parks, the golf course, actually pitched her last year on the idea of putting it in the park. And she told them at the time, I respect your cause as a veterans nonprofit, but not in our parks. Well, they went forward. We know that group now met with DeSantis in April of this year, and that project was pushed forward. But Senator Harrell has introduced a bill just last week, I believe it was, Senate Bill 80, calling it the State Park Preservation Act.
It's beautiful.
Which would essentially clarify the purpose of a park, particularly from a recreational standpoint. So there was sort of this language in state law that says, parks can be used for recreational purposes, which we believe was sort of the impetus for allowing these proposals like golf and pickleball into the park. But what Harrell's doing now is saying recreational purposes that maintain conservation value of a park. So you can hike, you can do things that are going to limit the amount of impediment on a natural park. So being able to hike and things like that would help maintain the natural beauty of a park. So Harrell's bills, we hear is going to have a lot of support behind it, both Republican and Democratic support. It's a bill we're going to be following very closely.
I wonder what the governor's office is going to do behind the scenes.
Well, we're watching it closely. We asked the governor's office for feedback on the bill. We didn't hear anything, whether or not they were going to support it, if the governor was going to support it.
Crickets. Hey, listen, we have an email from our good friend Bob W. in Tampa. Going back to the hurricane story, let me go ahead and read it. Mm-hmm. I was hoping you could ask your guest to comment on a theory I have. Bob's a very bright guy. I know him well. My suspicion is that it's not the storms that have so much changed, but Tampa Bay's resilience due to deforestation and overbuilding. For example, take the related project at Bayshore and Beta Bay. The increased runoff from once porous areas had to help exasperate. Did I say that right? Exasperate the already serious issue Tampa had with stormwater runoff, and that's just one of 100 projects. Happy holidays. Happy holidays to you, Bob. What do you say? You guys looking at that?
Well,
Overbuilding?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the two go hand in hand, 100%. I mean, if you look at the last time we had a direct hit 100 years ago and just how built it was then compared to what it is now, it's entirely different area.
Impervious surface is usually the key word.
So look at just how much development in very vulnerable areas. Like, I mean, I remember walking Paso Grill Beach before Hurricane Helene and seeing just how low-lying that whole area is. And thinking to myself, it's going to take not a major storm to really do some damage here. And sure enough, Helene this year proved just how vulnerable this area is. So absolutely, the two go hand in hand. Yes, we're having intensifying storms, but also we're building in places that we probably shouldn't be building on floodplains, on barrier islands, which are designed to move and ebb and flow with the natural patterns of hurricanes and storms. That's what barrier islands do. They shift and move, and so
now some people are actually over at the beaches and perhaps even in South Tampa and elsewhere are actually talking about lifting their houses. Lifting the existing house, get out of the floodplain by being elevated.
Yeah, and I mean,
is that a thing?
We've done a lot of reporting on Shore Acres. I'm sure it's a neighborhood you all probably know about. We've done a lot of reporting there over the years.
North St. Petersburg, sort of?
Yeah, just north of downtown St. Petersburg. It's a very low-lying neighborhood, but you talk to people there right now, and a very big conversation is lifting your homes, and people that can't afford to lift their homes are moving out. If you look at Zillow right now at that neighborhood and just seeing how many homes are for sale, it's telling.
Well, and probably with severely depressed prices.
Yes, much lower prices. Yes, absolutely.
These storms have just wreaked havoc on property values in those low-lying areas.
But you go further north, the Nature Coast and beyond. You look at the storm infrastructure there, and you see a lot of homes that are stilted. I think you're going to see, especially on the barrier islands, a shift towards that eventually, much higher elevated homes. But that costs money, and so you automatically sort of limit the type of population that's going to be able to live there if they can't afford to raise their homes.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say when we had Councilman Carlson on not that long ago, I had a great conversation with him thinking about all of the old school ranch style homes that you saw so predominantly in the post-war era built throughout the city. If they were anywhere near water, they're done.
I mean, they're 3 to 4 feet of water.
And again, to John's point, a lot of these folks who are in those original style homes, they are not in the financial position to potentially raise those homes or necessarily relocate. A lot of those folks are retirees. And I mean, it's going to very candidly change the character of a lot of Tampa Bay neighborhoods as you have a lot of folks that are more middle class, sort of pressed and squeezed out.
I'm from Gulfport. I live in Gulfport. And so if you saw what happened in downtown Gulfport, obviously it's a very eclectic downtown area.
Love Gulfport.
And the mayor, had some pretty strong remarks right after the storm. He was worried about the culture of Gulfport afterwards, and that whether or not people that are going to come in and rebuild these areas are going to change the culture and character of a small place like that.
Yeah, lots of keep Golden Dinosaur open. The place matters.
That place is great.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to WMNF's Down and Dirty. I'm John Dingfelder, joined by my partner Jason Marla, my radio partner, and Max
partner.
and Max Chesness from the Tampa Bay Times. Our phone number here to join the conversation is 813-239-9663, or you could email us at dj@wmnf.org. So, Max, where were we at? I cut you off.
Just storm infrastructure. I think the back-to-back storms have highlighted a lot of vulnerable areas in our Tampa Bay.
Can I say something though?
Sure.
It concerns me that it's highlighting stuff that we should have well known. Councilman Clendetta made a great point on council a couple of weeks ago. He's like, if Hurricane Helene or Milton changed your opinion on things, you probably haven't been paying much attention to the underlying risk, whether it was Project Phoenix. I think it was 2017. Washington Post broke the story about how, Tampa Bay is perhaps the most vulnerable, highly populated area for storms in the country. They're not ready. This was 7 years ago.
Right.
And we have done just about nothing. I mean, to fix. We're going to build $26 million for a West River walk, though. But
I think it's part of it is human nature. Just like with any sort of thing, people have to go through it to experience it physically to understand just how much at risk we are. And I think a lot of eyes have opened up, especially with these storms. We had people also forget we had Tropical Storm Debbie this year that also brought a lot of flooding to our area, especially river flooding. So these storms have opened up a lot of eyes to our area. I think people are leaving. One story we're working on now is talking to people that are moving out of Florida entirely or out of coastal areas because simply it's unaffordable.
Are they moving to Asheville?
Well, you would. Yeah,
Jesus.
You would think. Yeah, but I mean, even Asheville too. Like the mountain area, also. Like who knew just how at risk?
Which hurricane? That was Helene. They caught the tail end of Helene, and more people died up there in Asheville from flooding and
it was terrible.
Dams breaking and this and that. And
the river flooding was just a lot of saturation over 48 hours.
I mean, it's a national issue where we have a C- D+ grade for infrastructure as a country. The vast majority of it having been built 5-6 decades ago. We have not invested in any kind of these, roads, bridges, stormwater removal. And now we get to pay the piper on it.
One thing I'm particularly interested to is natural solutions. So if you look at areas that have like mangrove seawalls, how did those fare compared to an area that had a built seawall?
I've been screaming from mountaintops about the importance of us reseeding mangroves for a long time.
All right, let's see what Mary Lynn in St. Petersburg has to say. Good morning, Mary Lynn.
Hi, can you all hear me?
We can
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Clear as a bell. Go ahead.
Oh, wonderful. I just wanted to bring your attention to, I'm in St. Pete, and I was born and raised in St. Pete, and I'm 65 years old, so I've been around the block a few times. And I live in a neighborhood that is a non-flood area near St. Pete High area, and North Kenwood.
Yep.
And I had the property over 40 years where my home is now. We had a lot next door, and we built on it. And this was 17 years ago. And when we did, we put underground drainage in to capture the water and bring it to a cistern and then put it to the back of our property so there would not be runoff from our house.
Good for you.
And we also did other things to make sure no runoff. And yet, the city is giving us grief because my home is a visitability home. And that means any disabled person can visit. So we have pavers around our house. And they told us in our neighborhood that we had to have 35% green space. So what they're doing to the people who are all around my neighborhood, anyone who makes a complaint, they're going in and saying, I'm sorry, you have to tear up your yard and take everything out and leave it grass. And I said, why are you doing this to everyone? Well, runoff. I said, I called Oregon and I called other states. They have pervious pavers. Can we put those in? Nope, we don't accept that in the city of St. Pete. Nope, we don't accept that you have things going underground. It's ridiculous because we don't have 35% green space. We have about 20 to 25% green space. And
so Mary Lynn, I guess I would argue that perhaps they're well-intended, but maybe their engineering knowledge and sense isn't accurate.
Is that argument mainly in the name of flood control? Is that what they're arguing about?
That's what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
How did your neighborhood do during both storms?
We did not flood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think aren't you sort of on a ridge right through that area, Kenwood?
It's about 50 feet above sea level.
No, that's a nice ridge. Yeah.
And
it's a nice ridge.
Further west, if you're 49th Street and all of that, it's like 60 feet above street level.
So is the city explicitly saying to replace the concrete with plants? Is it that explicit?
Or turf, probably.
They're trying to. We have to fight to say, can we? We compared our lot with everyone else, and we found that all the rest of our neighbors have 25 to 5% green space because people have swimming pools, people have extra garages in the back of their home, and I foresee that. And I said, I'm not showing you they actually show photos of these. I said, I'm not doing this to get my neighbors in trouble. I'm just letting you know.
Yeah, no snitching.
Hey, Mary Lynn, will you do us a favor? Max's eyes sort of lit up like, hey, maybe this is a story idea. Will you email him at mchesnes, MCHESNES at TampaBay.com and tell him more, okay? We're going to run for now. Thanks for calling.
Let's get one more caller, and we got Jeanette, who's been patiently waiting in Clearwater. Jeanette.
Hey, Jeanette.
Jeanette? Are you here?
Jeanette, are you there? Jeanette.
All right, we tried. I believed in you.
Hold on, let me try one more time. Oh, we lost her.
So, real quick, we
got Victoria in Gulfport.
Do we? All right, here we go.
And she's a neighbor of Max's, and she says that he needs to take his garbage more often. No, I'm just kidding.
Victoria, you there?
I am here. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for calling in.
Good. Fellow Gulfportian, I was lucky. I'm 13 feet above sea level, so
thank goodness
didn't get flooded. But it's been really sad to see a lot of my friends leaving their homes because they can't afford to fix them, or they're so afraid that they're leaving. And I was wondering, John, I know you have some property, if you still do, on a barrier island over there in Indian Rocks. How did you do?
Madeira Beach, we got 4 feet of water.
Oh boy!
In that house, and we're actually talking about maybe raising it up.
Are you?
Just as a permanent solution.
Is that your primary residence?
Right.
No.
So, Victoria, we appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm just curious. My thought is, I feel if these houses are getting destroyed instead of FEMA coming in and continuing to rebuild them, I just feel like we should turn the barrier islands into parks that people can visit and enjoy, and if they get flooded, then so be it, and they can come back and everything will be okay because there's no structures. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I've heard the argument. I think convincing people to leave their homes on barrier islands is probably a very difficult task. It's a conversation I had, especially after Hurricane Ian, in 2022. Right. I talked to people, why do you live in an area where it's so at flood risk? Yeah. And one of the men that I asked that question to, he pointed out the window and he said, it's because of that right there. It's the Gulf of Mexico. That's why I live right here, so I have access to that. So it's this interesting paradox, right? The thing that we are drawn to the most is the thing that is putting us the most at risk.
Victoria, we appreciate the call and have a happy holiday.
Thank you so much. I think Jeanette has called back. Let's see if we can get Jeanette on. Right. Jeanette?
Yes.
There you are. You're there.
Thanks for coming back.
I don't know how I got disconnected.
We appreciate you.
I'll blame it on Jason. Go ahead, Jeanette. What's up?
I'll accept that blame.
I'm really glad you're talking about the environment, and I do think that Gulfport's whole energy has changed a lot in the last few years, for sure. So I do think that the hurricane is going to make it even more uncool.
Yeah, keep it cool,
but
right?
I do want to say that Golden Nugget in Gulfport is Golden Dinosaur, because you mentioned it.
Yeah.
And I do want to say that is a vegan restaurant, and that if you eat more vegan food and hopefully go vegan, you will save a lot of trees. The deforestation is a big problem with meat-eating people.
I think cattle contribute tremendously through their flatulence, I believe.
That is true.
Of course, the greenhouse gases, and from taking up, you have to clear cut to make the space for the animals, and then you have to clear cut, and have huge farms to grow the food that the animals eat.
Very true.
Right.
So we don't need to be ruining our environment, and all we have to do is give up a few food items, and we eat vegan.
It's pretty delicious, though.
Very happy people.
All right, Jeanette, thank you so much, and hang in there in Gulfport.
Take care. We're going to have a burger later. I want to switch real quick from the last time that we have about one of the other stories that you've been breaking, which is about Appalachia Coal, which I'm deeply passionate about, and the potential,
oil
the potential of oil drilling and exploration there, and I kind of want to juxtapose that against the light of we just had an election in which energy independence is, I guess, a paramount thing, and we have a president who's
drill baby drill,
and I just wanted to see sort of what's happening there, what the sense is from your story, and I guess what the future has for, I guess, oil exploration in the state of Florida.
Sure, it's great. So great question. So this past Monday, this week, hearings began in Tallahassee between a Louisiana-based company and the state of Florida's environmental regulators about whether or not to allow oil exploration drilling in near the Apalachicola River up in Calhoun County. The state of Florida, the environmental regulators here have issued an intent to approve a permit to this company to dig 14,000 feet into the earth to search for oil around the Apalachicola River Basin. Understandably, environmental groups, but also, again, a bipartisan coalition of people are against this proposal, especially this past week I spoke with oyster farmers in Apalachicola Bay who are extremely worried that this could have downstream impacts to their oyster harvest.
How about those fishermen? Remember Fisherman Bob or whatever from up there?
Yeah, about the Rice's whale.
Yeah.
Remember that? Yeah.
Those fishermen should be concerned about this too.
Yeah, so
they are.
But recreational anglers, commercial anglers are very concerned about it. Oyster farmers, aquaculturists, people that just live around there. I mean, I think I heard an argument from one woman at a shellfish institute who said even if there isn't any ecological impacts, it's hard to market shellfish that are right next door to an oil
my
drill.
notes for things to cover.
Well, maybe they like to grow on the derricks and all that. Listen, let's take one last call for the day. Larry in Englewood, down south of Sarasota. Larry, good morning.
Amy, good morning. I just caught the tail end of it. Are you guys talking about the 50% rule on the destroyed houses?
We did not discuss that. I think that's a FEMA rule,
right?
Of where if your house gets messed up, you're only allowed to invest 50% of the value of the structure. If you do invest more than that in the rehab of your house, you have to do something, bring it up to.
You've got to bring it up to code. But that rule actually went in place for people that were buying these houses and remodeling them. So if you want to remodel more than 50%, then you can only do so much per year. I don't believe it was ever set up for remodel or replace. If your house gets damaged, you should be able to repair it. However, no insurance company is going to cover you at that point. So if you've got the cash, one thing, I had 3 feet of water in my house, and if I would have hired a contractor, probably would have been $70,000. But I pretty much repaired everything for about $25,000.
How are you doing these days? I mean, so the storm is,
which storm hit you?
Well, the first one put about 6 inches of water. Not Debbie. The one after that put about 6 inches in, and then, I had never had water, and I've owned it for 30 years. And I'm thinking, okay. I started doing repairs. I'm like, I'm never getting hit twice in 3 weeks. Come on, it's been 30 years.
Of course.
Well, boom, 3 feet in. But however, my house was built in 55. And the lumber, it's old yellow pine, so it's really hard. And I don't have any drywall. They used plaster back then. And you couldn't build a house like that today because it wouldn't be environmentally friendly because there's no insulation. It's concrete block with, cement plaster on the inside. So no drywall to take out, right?
How'd you deal with the insurance companies?
I just did it myself. I didn't care.
Yeah.
I just ripped everything out. I wanted to redo the bathrooms anyway, so I just did those first. And I've got an old red oak floor in there. It buckled up. My AC was still running, so I kicked it down to 65 and ran it for 2 months straight. And it dehumidified it, and it set down pretty well. I mean, it's still a little rough, but it is 1955, and I think they've got a term for that called distressed wood or patina. So I tell everybody it's a classic floor now.
How far were you from the water? Are you on the water?
Yeah, I'm on the water.
Yeah.
I'm not on the bay. All the houses that were on the bay, they got blown out, man. They got 6 foot of water with waves. I mean, if you had a concrete house, the only bit of the concrete that was standing was the parts that were poured solid. And I got news for you. The hurricane windows, what a joke. Blown right out.
Wow.
If it hits hard, it's all luck. I mean, it really is. I mean, how many times have you seen it where you've got 5 houses and 2 are just like they picked them out with their fingers and they're blown away.
Little micro bursts. Larry, we appreciate you listening.
Yeah, man.
Appreciate you calling. Have a great day and stay dry.
Good luck with everything.
So, gentlemen, got a couple of minutes to
wrapping up our wrap up.
Wrap up our wrap.
On the oil thing, really quickly, I think
please.
that has a lot of people up in arms, and so the hearing, from what I've heard, that the administrative law judge that has been hearing these arguments isn't going to make a decision right away. So it's going to take a little bit of time about whether or not to move forward with the intent to allow this to happen in Apalachicola Bay.
I wonder who appointed him or her.
I actually don't know.
That's a state position. I think it's governor appointed, but
there were over 200 people that gathered on the front steps of the Florida Department of Environmental Protection's headquarters in Tallahassee this week to protest it.
Yeah, and speaking of protests, the Florida Springs group sued the state on behalf of all the beautiful Florida Springs that we have, because the state, I guess, is dragging their feet on rulemaking.
Yeah, in 2016, they were the environmental regulators were directed to create a couple new springs rules to define what is harmful to Florida springs. 9 years have passed, and there hasn't been any rulemaking that has been officially completed yet.
And the springs are suffering. You can see it when you go visit them.
So we've had 9 years have passed since then, and how much development has cropped up around springs since then, probably, and over the course of 9 years, probably a lot. So the Springs Council sued the state, and they had a deadline of this week to either respond to the lawsuit or propose new rules, and they proposed new rules. So
now the people are rising up on both sides of the aisle. The conservatives passed a constitutional amendment by more than 60% for the right to hunt and fish.
Amendment 2.
Amendment 2. Did that come out of the legislature? Did they put it on the ballot?
The legislature last year, there was a vote to put it on the ballot, and that had a lot of approval. I think usually measures like that, just to put something on the ballot, gets approval. Whether or not someone agrees with the measure or not, people will say, well, let's take it to the voters and let them decide on it. And that's what happened.
That sounds like a neat thing, a right to fish or hunt. Although Sierra Club and some of the other environmental groups in the state were opposed to it.
Yeah, so the concerns on environmental groups, environmental advocates are worried that this could potentially open up potentially harmful management strategies, or allow hunts in areas that maybe historically haven't allowed hunting because of biodiversity regulations and things like that. So people are worried on that front. I think people that are in favor of it are claiming that there is sort of the hunting rights are at risk from animal rights groups, right? And that they want to enshrine it into state, it's already in state law, but into the state constitution to prevent anything from happening in the future. So that's what happened here. I think that passed with over 60% of the vote. Amendment 2 did. So, and just this week, we saw conversations about potentially opening up a bear hunt in the state of Florida, and we saw what happened a few years ago when that happened. It was a very swift response to hunting bears. Speaking
of endangered, one of the last stories that I read that you wrote was about we have 200 Florida panthers left, approximately. This past year, there were 30 of them died, 20-something hit by cars.
Yeah, 3 out of every 4 have been struck by cars. And actually, I wrote that story 2 weeks ago now, right before Thanksgiving, and we've already had 3 additional panther deaths since that story.
Are they on the move this time of year or something? Or?
Well, it's
or maybe just people are on the move.
Just people are on the move. I mean, these roads that they have to cross are pretty treacherous, and it really underscores the need for allowing more green space in the state, right? Allowing wildlife to pass freely, unimpeded by development or humans and cars. Which is the number one killer for these endangered animals.
All right, gentlemen, one of us was naughty during the vegan call.
Oh, yeah, I know. I made a joke.
Okay. It says your comment to have a burger was insensitive to the caller. You see, you don't want to solve the problem. You want to add to it. Educate yourself about veganism and the environment. I will not name names as to who talked about the burger. But
listen,
you were chastised, young man.
We wanted to have time to have Commissioner Joshua Wostel on today, but unfortunately, as every episode, we seem to find ourselves running out of time. It's a shame, John.
All right, John, this is John Dingfelder. Down and Dirty is the show. Max Chestnut from the Tampa Bay Times is doing an amazing job there and covering environmental and other important issues in our community. Keep it up in 2025, Max.
Absolutely.
Please do.
I will.
And Jason, you better turn vegan.
They paved paradise, put up a parking lot. lot. With a pink hotel, a boutique, and a swinging hot spot. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? They paved paradise, put up a parking lot. They took all the trees, put them in a tree museum. And they charged the people $1.50 just to see them.